welcome to this 2025-26 NBA season preview edition of the BCS podcast. We are going to cover both conferences and all 30 teams, while also hearing from a number of fans on how they think their teams will do this season. And let's start with the Eastern Conference and last season's defeated NBA finalists, the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers have come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of seasons, making the Eastern Conference Finals in the 23-24 season and then coming one game away from being the NBA champions last season. They do, however, go into this season without Tyrese Haliburton, who tore his Achilles in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and they've also lost Miles Turner in free agency to the Milwaukee Bucks. There is still talent on this roster in the shape of Pascal Siakam and Bennedict Mathurin, but otherwise it's a hard-working roster full of depth pieces and role players. In particular, James Wiseman and Jay Huff by committee are not going to replace what Miles Turner gave the Pacers in a league where the centre position is increasingly important again. The Pacers might be able to make the playoffs this season, and if Tyrese Haliburton can get back from injury in time for the postseason, then this Pacers team might be able to make some noise in the postseason. In a similar vein, the Boston Celtics aren't considered to be serious contenders because Jason Tatum is out for the season with an injury. There is still talent on this roster though, in the shape of Jaylen Brown, Anthony Simons, Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, and I also can't say enough good things about Chris Boucher, who has come over in free agency from the Toronto Raptors. The big issue for me though is that multi-talented bigs are incredibly important in today's NBA, and the Celtics have lost their top three centres all in one go, as Kristaps Porzingis has been traded to the Atlanta Hawks, Al Horford has gone to the Golden State Warriors in free agency, and Luke Cornet has signed with the San Antonio Spurs in free agency. That doesn't change the fact that Joe Mazzulla is probably the best young coach in the NBA though, and so there's every chance that the Celtics could still make the playoffs, and if Tatum can get back from injury in time for the postseason, that gives the Celtics a young, hungry and fresh superstar who will want to prove a point. In terms of actual contenders in the East, the Milwaukee Bucks should be an obvious candidate. The vast majority of that core roster is still there, other than Brook Lopez, who has gone to the Clippers in free agency, but then again, as mentioned, he has been replaced by Miles Turner. They've also added further depth to the roster with the addition of Gary Harris and Cole Anthony from the Orlando Magic, and so there shouldn't be any excuse for this Bucks team to not have a serious go at making the NBA Finals. The Atlanta Hawks have also done a good job of building a strong roster this off-season. I love Kristaps Porzingis. He gives his teams a bunch of stuff that the opposition doesn't have. And having seen the defensive partnership he built with Derek White in Boston, I'll love to see what the defensive partnership is like that he builds with Dyson Daniels in Atlanta. And I also can't wait to see what the offensive partnership with Trae Young looks like. The problem with Kristaps Porzingis is that he struggles to stay healthy though, and that is what could derail the Hawks' chances of making a serious push for the playoffs and beyond, despite having a deep roster and a good head coach in Quinn Snyder. Meanwhile, the New York Knicks made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals last season and will be looking to go further. Karl-Anthony Towns was absolutely fantastic for the Knicks last season, and given that Mitchell Robinson is now back and fully healthy, that makes the Knicks front court even stronger than it already was. Given that the Knicks have also added Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele to what was already a good roster, the Knicks arguably have the best and strongest roster in the NBA this season. I certainly did not agree with them firing coach Tom Thibodeau, but let's see how they do this season. For more on this, let's head over to Long Island, New York to hear from Knicks fan and British expat Ross Worsley.
So I think with the Knicks, we really have kind of kept the core of the team. So I'm expecting more of the same for next year. Obviously, the biggest change has been at coach. So with Mike Brown, so I think there's going to be a bit of a shift in a more, hopefully, more attacking style of play. Less focus on the defense first. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit more, of an exciting games to watch this year. I think last year, obviously, was a great season. We did well, but there were some complaints about the style of play and how many minutes people were playing and stuff like that, which I'm sure would be a little bit different this year. We've managed, most of the players we managed to keep. We did manage to sign Jordan Clarkson, which hopefully will help a little bit with Brogdon retiring, so we're going to need some help at guard, so hopefully that he'll be able to help with that. I'm looking forward to seeing him playing. I expect us to be in like the 50 to 55 win mark again this year and have a good run, get into the finals. I think as long as the coach fits in well and the team stays healthy, I don't see why we can't. And I'd love to get the Pacers again and absolutely smash them, because last year was very annoying losing to them.
When talking about strong rosters in the East, you also have to mention the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers did not do well last season, and I would say a large part of that was due to the fact that Joel Embiid prioritised personal achievement by going to the Olympics with Team USA last summer over properly rehabbing his knee, and that meant that he missed a large part of last season. Embiid should be healthier now though, and he's still surrounded by Tyrese Maxey and Paul George, as well as a bench full of veterans. Add to that the fact that Jared McCain is also returning from injury, and the Sixers picks up VJ Edgecombe in the draft, and if things go right, there is a world where we very well could see the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA Finals next June. In terms of teams in the East that should make the playoffs, the Miami Heat have got to be in the conversation. Erik Spoelstra is one of the best and smartest coaches in the NBA and has been for nearly 20 years. Even when he didn't have what was regarded as a strong roster, he still got the Heat to the NBA Finals in both 2020 and 2023. And the Heat do have a decent roster this season, so who knows what they could achieve. Further north in Florida, the Orlando Magic also have a strong roster. Both Pablo Banchero and Franz Wagner are fully healthy again, and they have also added Desmond Bane to improve a team that had the worst 3-point scoring percentage in the NBA last season. All being well then, the Magic should make the playoffs and could certainly make some noise in the postseason. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Cavaliers had the best record in the East last season before coming undone in the playoffs. I still don't think they have enough to be a serious championship contender, but they have added depth to their roster in the shape of Thomas Bryant and Larry Nance, and someone in Lonzo Ball, who I know as a Bulls fan adds creativity to the roster as well as a bunch of intangibles, so they certainly should be in a stronger position this season. Speaking of the Chicago Bulls, for me, the best addition to the Bulls roster last season following the Zach LaVine trade was Zach Collins. He finally gave the Bulls some depth among the bigs and meant that we had some presence in the paint throughout games or when Nikola Vucevic was injured. As much as any team would miss a player the calibre of Zach LaVine, it spoke volumes that once we had this much more balanced and deeper roster with the addition of Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter and Trey Jones, we had a much better win-loss record. I am very happy that we've retained those three, as well as Josh Giddey, who has recently signed a contract extension, meaning that we continue to have the creative ball handler through whom our fast-paced improving offense was running last season. For the Bulls to continue to improve and make a serious push for a playoff rather than a play-in space, we have to also retain Nikola Vucevic. He averages a double-double He is a very good player, and as much as some fans don't want to acknowledge this, he is one of the best centres in the league. We are not going to get an equivalent in any trade for him. By retaining him, we also keep an experienced head on the roster on what is generally quite a young team. On this point, there is too much talent on the Detroit Pistons roster for them not to build upon last season's playoff appearance. Cade Cunningham showed out last year and was rightly named an All-Star. He is also surrounded by young talent like Jalen Durant and Jason Ivey, as well as veterans like Tobias Harris and Duncan Robinson. They certainly aren't going to be championship contenders in my view, but then again, stranger things have happened in Detroit in the not too recent past with arguably a weaker roster. I'm also going to repeat what I said about the Toronto Raptors this time last year. For me, the Raptors have got far too good of a roster for them not to be doing better. RJ Barrett is a fantastic player who can put up a lot of points, and he's not even the star of this team. That title goes to Scotty Barnes. Those two are then supported by the likes of Emmanuel Quickley, Jakob Perkle, and the fantastic and underrated Brandon Ingram. Again, if they aren't making a serious push for the playoffs, I'm going to want to know why, because the talent is certainly there. Over at the Barclays Centre, the Brooklyn Nets are again expected to not do well this season. There is certainly talent there. Both Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr. are good scorers, and Nick Claxton makes the Nets good in the paint. The problem is there is just not enough depth of quality on this roster, and that is accentuated by a hole in the roster where a starting caliber point guard should be. To a lesser extent, the same is also true of the Washington Wizards. There is certainly talent there. CJ McCollum, in my view, is both a wonderful player and a wonderful professional. And Chris Middleton is very underrated and gets far too much criticism than he should do. They are also surrounded by other good players like Corey Kispert and Bilal Coulibaly and Alex Sarr. Those latter two are very young and are going to keep developing and could very well be All-Stars in the future. The problem is, this Wizard roster is generally weaker than it was last season, and they did not do well last season, so I expect that they're not going to do well again this season. On this point, the Charlotte Hornets do have a stronger roster than last season. They have signed good players like Mason Plumlee, Pat Connaughton, Colin Sexton and Spencer Dinwiddie that give this roster much more strength and depth. I've seen some commentary saying that the Hornets will make the playoffs this season in what is seen as a weaker Eastern Conference. And while I certainly think that they will have an improved win-loss record, I don't know if that improvement will be enough to make them see the postseason. I will gladly be proved wrong on that point though. Let's head over to the Western Conference now, and let's start with the defending champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They are going to want to defend their title, and that has been aided by the fact that they've retained all of the key pieces of what was a very strong roster last season, meaning that they should have also have retained the coherence, togetherness and team spirit that defined their run to the NBA championship. For more on this, let's head over to Oklahoma and hear from Thunder fan and first time contributor to the BCS podcast, Jessie Hopper.
It's been a pretty quiet off-season for the Thunder outside of parades and general revelry, particularly for a Sam Presti team. The biggest news we made was signing SGA, Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Williams to Supermax extensions, which will take all three through the 2030-31 season, which seems like a very long time from now, but gives the Thunder a locked-in core for the next 5 years, which is really exciting. As for the rest of it, the Thunder are running it back, bringing back the entire 2024-25 team in hopes of repeating as NBA champions, something that hasn't been done in nearly a decade. The biggest issues I think that the Thunder are having to confront are heightened expectations. It's, to make the leap they did from, 22 to 40 something wins to 60 something wins last season. People are talking about, will they go after Golden State's record? No, they're not going to. They're not going to. I don't think they're even going to try. I think what they realized from this playoff run, from this championship, is that the games in the regular season matter, but the playoff games matter more. And a record of wins may stand up, but the title is more important. And so I think when it comes down to it, that will be the guiding factor. As for my predictions, I don't think the Thunder will challenge that record, but I think they'll make the playoffs. I think they'll make the Western Conference Finals, and I do think that they will make the finals again. My stunning prediction is that the Thunder are going to be the first team to win a back-to-back title in nearly a decade. I think they have all the talent. I think now they have the experience, and I think they believe. So, go Thunder.
Down in Texas, there are two other serious championship contenders in my eyes. The Dallas Mavericks have got a strong roster. The issue post-Luka Doncic trade last season was not that they did not continue to have a strong roster, it's that roster wasn't healthy and then more players got injured too. If Anthony Davis can stay healthy and he is aided by the likes of Klay Thompson and the number 1 draft pick Cooper Flagg, there is no reason why this team cannot make the postseason. Once they make the postseason, Kyrie Irving should also have returned from injury by then, and so there's every chance that they could make a serious push for the championship. The same is also true of the Houston Rockets. While I do not agree in terms of long-term roster planning with them trading away Jalen Green, they have brought in one of the best players in the league in Kevin Durant, and they are very much in win now mode. If they as a roster can build togetherness and coherence much like what we've seen in Oklahoma City, then there's every reason why a roster of this depth and with that much talent in it can't go on and make a serious push to the championship, given that there's a good mix of experience like Kevin Durant and Jeff Green and young improving talent like Alperen Şengün and Amen Thompson. Having made the Western Conference Finals last season, the Minnesota Timberwolves should very much be considered to be in serious contention for the championship. Again, Anthony Edwards is fast becoming one of the league's best, and he is then surrounded by a very good roster. All the pieces are there for the Timberwolves to be able to make a serious push for the championship this season. Speaking of good rosters, the Denver Nuggets also have a very good roster. Any roster that has Nikola Jokic on it is going to have a chance. But it's the fact that Jokic also has a great connection with Jamal Murray. Christian Brown develops into a very good starter last season. Guys like Aaron Gordon contribute positively, and they've also brought back someone like Bruce Brown as well, who was a very popular member of that championship winning team in 2023. I certainly didn't agree with the Nuggets firing Mike Malone last season for whatever reason. I still don't agree with that decision. But like I said, it is a very good roster headed up by a 3-time MVP. So let's see what David Allen does with it. Speaking of good rosters, the Los Angeles Clippers continue to have a very good roster, and they've then added to it again this offseason. Bradley Beal, John Collins and Brook Lopez. These are all guys that you add to a roster because you want to win a championship and you want to win it now. And don't tell me that the addition of the returning Chris Paul is not going to galvanise this roster even further. This is a roster that is very much in win now mode, and if they are at least seriously contending for the championship, something has very much gone wrong. The problem is, as I've already outlined, the Western Conference is very strong this season. On this point, I haven't even mentioned the LA Lakers yet, who also have a good roster and a team leader in LeBron James, who is going to want to win one last championship. His successor, Luka Doncic, is another generational talent who is coming into this season looking leaner and meaner than he ever did in Dallas. This roster doesn't quite have the right mix in my view, but those two players have got some strong backup, so they should have a chance. For more on this, let's head over to Lakers fan and friend of the show, Freddie Law Keane.
This off-season, when he brought in DeAndre Ayton as one of the big players this year, and potentially a ceiling raiser, gives you a lot more length, gives you a big man. Sometimes not the most reliable, but it's a key addressing of those needs. Some other off-season news is LeBron James did not opt out of his contract, so a lot of talk, a lot of speculation that this really might be it for LeBron. Have we got one more year? Will he juice every single bit of magic out of his body to try and deliver one more spectacle, one more year? Having said that, it could mean nothing. We could be talking about him for another 5 years. It's hard to know with LeBron. But Luka Doncic signed up again. Well, he just signed up his first contract with the Lakers, and he also gets a preseason with the Lakers. He gets to settle in without the emotion of a trade and becoming one of sports' most untradeable players into a new environment, into different expectations. I think it weighs heavy on an athlete, and I think the idea that he's had a pretty easy preseason. He hasn't played much at all, if any. I don't really watch much preseason, but this is his team. This is the point is here that he's going to be here after LeBron, is the idea of the front office of the Lakers. So, it's really his team. It's his time to shine. And with a bit of stability behind him, I think we'd really like to see what he can do. Another key move is another guard, Marcus Smart, coming in. A long-time Celtic, bounced around the league a little bit, but I think at his best, at his healthiest, he'll be a really nice addition to the squad. I'm excited to see what he can do. One concern I do have about the team is durability. Luka Doncic is a big-framed man. He's played a big summer of EuroLeague, or not EuroLeague, the European games. And LeBron is pretty old now, and DeAndre Ayton's had some injury concerns. I am a little concerned there still might be a little bit of a thin squad once a few names drop out. It starts to look a little bit more concerning, but Austin Reeves can have another step up, and will Dalton Neck have another progressive step, or will he be trade bait again this year and maybe bring another player in as the season ticks underway? I think it's quite an exciting year. I think a lot can happen. There's a lot of scope for change. There's still, I think, if there was to be a trade, I think Austin Reeves would be the piece people would ask for. Whether they'd get them or not, I'm not sure, but he's attractive to any team in the league. But Dalton Neck seemed to be the one that was offered around last year. I don't know who that might be. It depends on injuries, but there's still some space for another player or two. But I think the feeling there's a bit of optimism this year. And while the Clippers in LA have had probably one of the most turbulent off seasons a basketball team can have, we've had a pretty stable one for the Lakers, which is a nice change. We've known LeBron staying. We've got Doncic sorted, and the trade and pickups have been nice and easy. There's some optimism. I'm going to go a little bit heavier this year. I expect a top 4 finish in the West, and I would like conference semis at a minimum.
The Golden State Warriors are also looking to win one last championship the two of their greatest ever players. This is probably the last chance Steph Curry and Draymond Green have got of winning a championship together, and other members of the roster like Jimmy Butler and Seth Curry are also 35 and older. The Warriors do have some good developing young players, but for me this is a team that makes the playoffs and then goes no further. Elsewhere in the West, there has been a lot of roster turnover in Arizona, but the Phoenix Suns should have enough to still make the playoffs. It's a young roster and Devin Booker is now the sole star on the team, but there is enough there elsewhere on the court that the Suns should have a decent season. The same is also true of the Sacramento Kings. I shall refrain from making the joke that they are basically just a retirement home for ex-Bulls at this point, given that they've got DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine and Doug McDermott at this point, because yes, they do actually have a very good roster. If I was building an NBA roster, guys like Domantas Sabonis and Malik Monk would certainly be on the list that I would want to recruit. And they also have someone like Russell Westbrook, who is one of the best players of his generation, that has come in on a one-year deal and will add depth to that point guard position, along with another very good point guard in Dennis Schroeder. And so yeah, the Kings should have a decent season this year and at least make the playoffs. I don't think they'll go any further, but it is a good roster and all the best to them in their retirement. That's also the case for the Memphis Grizzlies too. They have a good mix of youth, talent and experience, and so they should make the playoffs. That is very much contingent on Ja Morant, 1, staying healthy, and 2, staying out of trouble in a conference that is going to be very competitive this season. I would even go so far as to say that there will be multiple teams in the West that will have winning records but won't make the playoffs. On that point, the New Orleans Pelicans have an incredibly talented roster. I personally don't think Willie Green is good enough to get the best out of this roster though. A bit like Billy Donovan in Chicago, the way Willie Green wants to play and wants to set his teams out is not compatible with success in today's NBA. I will say this, and this applies to a few teams in the NBA currently, Tom Thibodeau and Mike Malone do not have head coaching jobs currently, and I would question how any team is going to succeed in today's NBA when they don't have a true big in the paint. What I will say is that young head coaches should be given a chance though. This is certainly true of the Portland Trail Blazers, where Chauncey Billups started to show some real acumen as a head coach last season. He goes into this season with a good roster, and if they can make the playoffs, although I don't think they will, the Trailblazers will be boosted by the return of Damian Lillard, who returned to Portland following being waived by the Bucks after sustaining an Achilles injury. The Utah Jazz, meanwhile, have also got a good roster. They've got the best and deepest front court in the entire NBA, in fact. But the problem is, that roster is fundamentally unbalanced. I complained for years about the Chicago Bulls having a guard-heavy roster. The Jazz have the opposite problem. They've got too much depth in the front court and then no depth in the back court. If the Jazz as an organisation are serious about building a roster that can compete for years to come, rather than tanking in the hope that they get a good draft pick, then they are going to have to make some trades. That being said, a team that has benefited from building through the draft in recent years and then adding to it with shrewd trades is the San Antonio Spurs. Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle have won Rookie of the Year the last 2 seasons, and there is every chance that Dylan Harper could make it 3 in a row. These 3 could become the core of a team that the Spurs front office then builds around, particularly given that De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sochan and Keldon Johnson are all still under 32. This is a team that is set up for great success in the future perhaps. The problem is they have now lost one of the greatest head coaches of all time in Greg Popovich, who has had to leave his head coaching position due to illness. He is still officially the Spurs president of basketball operations, but losing him as head coach is a loss not just to the Spurs, but to the NBA and to the game as a whole. It should be a good season then. The West is incredibly strong this year, and there are also some decent teams in the East too. One thing that I said last season was that I expected 2 expansion teams to be announced. That didn't happen, but I certainly think it will happen this year. Given that one of those teams is expected to be based in Las Vegas, it would make sense that that announcement will be made while the NBA Cup Final is being played in Sin City. As someone who grew up in the 90s watching the Seattle Supersonics play, I certainly hope that the return of that franchise is the other expansion team. As I said last season, if you add 2 new teams to the Western Conference, one team would have to be moved over to the Eastern Conference. Given that they are the original incarnation of the Charlotte Hornets, I fully expect that it would be the New Orleans Pelicans that would be reallocated to the East to even up the conferences. Finally, we've seen that multiple players are going to miss this season through injury. Tyrese Halliburton, Jason Tatum and Damian Lillard all injured their Achilles either late in the regular season or during the playoffs and will now miss this season. Kyrie Irving also tore his ACL and will miss all of this season, and let's not forget that Fred VanVleet of the Rockets damaged his Achilles competing in an unofficial team workout this off-season. This is not a freak occurrence, as we've already seen Kevin Durant injure his Achilles during the playoffs and then miss all of the next season. Something has to be done by the NBA about player workloads rather than the league complaining about players being rested for games and threatening sanctions if star players do miss regular season games, while also adding at least 2 games to the regular season schedule for the teams that make the NBA Cup Final. It is not good for the league, the teams, or the fans that 5 of its top players are going to miss this season. And if the NBA are going to announce 2 expansion teams, they also need to be announcing a reduction in teams' regular season schedules, given that the national media are going to have 2 extra teams' games to broadcast and 2 new media markets are going to have NBA teams. Once again, thank you to all of the contributors who gave their thoughts on how their teams will do. But for now, this brings an end to this edition of the BCS podcast. Thank you for joining me, and as always, I certainly hope to see you again next time. Bye bye now. The BCS podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Boban Apostolov and Pixabay for the use of the music and sound effects in this episode. This episode features contributions from Jessie Hopper, Freddie and Ross Worsley.